Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Hud, chapter 11, and today I will cover verses 61 to 68, the account of the nation of Thamud. These are the references, and this is our contact in case there is any query or question regarding the contents of this presentation. Recap verses 50 to 60. These were the verses covered in our previous presentation. The messenger Hud went to the nation of Ad, who had transgressed and had created imbalance in the land. The Quran particularly draws our attention to two major crimes. Firstly, they used to resort to construction of grand buildings in the land with a view to manifest their arrogance power, not for the benefit of mankind. So that is important because Quran says that whatever we do over here should have a utility value and it must be for the good of mankind. Secondly, they gave a free rein to using their power against the weak in order to keep them under their subjugation forever. They were warned by the messenger Hud over a long period of time through the Wahi of Allah, but they rejected this repeatedly and did not believe they could be punished for what they were doing. And this is an issue which is important for the finding out about the human psyche, that human beings do not feel that they are accountable for what they do, particularly when they become wealthy and they gain power. And this is an important aspect to which the Quran draws our attention again and again. Ultimately, they were destroyed by a hurricane which raged over a period of many days, and they were eliminated from the land and buildings in which they had dwelt and committed injustices. Here the Quran informs us that the law of the rise and fall of nations obeys the law of requital of Allah, and new nations will occupy the places vacated by former tyrannical nations in the world. The messenger Hud and the Momineen started a new life under the system of Deen, and this continued unhampered by unjust people. The present presentation and overview. I will go through some salient points of today's presentation. Here the account of the people of Thamud is briefly described. The messenger Saleh, who was from among these people, was sent towards them with Wahi from Allah. He told them to give up their man-made laws and to obey the laws of Allah so that the system of Deen could be established in the land. These man-made laws were the ones which created the problem and the inequality among people. And that is why the Quran has asked us to come under the laws given through Wahi. However, just like the people of Nuh and Hud, they too rejected the guidance of Allah as they did not wish to give up the path of their forefathers. There was gross inequality in their society. They deprived the poor from use of the land and did not allow their animals to graze on the pastures and use the sources of water. The messenger Saleh managed to persuade them to reach some agreement, and as a symbol said that this she-camel will be allowed to roam around freely in the land of Allah. So as a sign, they agreed that this she-camel will have the privilege to go around and graze around and drink water wherever it wishes. However, these people went against this agreement, and as a consequence, they were faced with total annihilation. The messenger Saleh and the Momineen were saved from this destruction. Now let us go to the first verse, 1161, for this presentation. The Quran relates to the reality of the human existence. وَإِلَى ثَمُودَ أَخَاهُمْ صَالِحًا قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَٰهٍ غَيْرُهُ هُوَ أَنشَأَكُم مِّنَ الْأَرْضِ وَاسْتَعْمَرَكُم فِيهَا فَاسْتَغْفِرُوهُ ثُمَّ تُوبُوا إِلَيْهِ Inna Rabbi Qaribun Mujib. Similarly, Saleh was sent as a messenger from amongst their own brethren to the people of Thamud. He also said the same thing, that you should only adopt the rule of the laws of Allah. Other than Him, there is no other sovereign for you. He made you rise up in this land and settled you. In order to avoid that destruction which is about to befall you due to your wrong conduct, seek protection from the laws of Allah. After turning your faces away from every other direction, come to Him and thus come under the shadow of His Rahmat. And Rahmat means we know your further nourishment and development within the divine guidance. Remember, he is not far away from you, he is close by, and he responds to your own supplication. Further reflections. The account of the people of Thamud comes next in this surah, which informs us that these people also rejected the guidance of Wahi, and they told the messenger Saleh that they did not wish to follow the laws of Allah. A few points are outlined here for our attention by the Quran. Firstly, give up the path of man-made laws and come to the guidance provided by Allah so that you can start to appreciate the higher purpose of life. Secondly, you need to reflect on your own creation and then the fact that you are now established in this land. However, your conduct is such that this state of affairs cannot continue unabated. And if you do not abandon your wrong path in life, then some ruin will befall on you. In order to avoid this, you need to seek the protection of Allah's laws. So it's not only the fear, but the thing was that imbalances and inequality and the problems existed in the society. As we know, in all man-made systems, there are tremendous issues in the society, and particularly people at the lower end who are poor economically. And there is nothing about the self as well. So what these messengers told them, these people, was based on facts, based on evidence, and people were experiencing it. But those in power and who are wealthy did not wish to come to the guidance of Allah. And this is what the point is in all these accounts of various messengers. Thirdly, the system of rububiyyat is placed within your reach only if you return to Allah, i.e. His Wahi, and this will lead to a better life based on balance. And all these messengers, they explain to them step by step that this is how it functions and this is what the advantages you will get. Your psyche will become better and you will become free from fear and huzn because there will be an equitable distribution of wealth. Not only that, but there will be opportunities for self-development. Next verse, 1162, beliefs of forefathers have firm hold on people. Qalu ya Salehu qad kunta fina marjuban qabla haza. Atanhana an nabuda ma yabudu abawna wa innana lafi shakkin mimma taduna ilayhi murid. Now, there was a reaction from those people who were in power in that society. They said, "Oh Saleh, we had a great many expectations associated with you, that you will be a true follower in the footsteps of your elders. You will raise the stature of our gods. You will spread this religion far and wide through your capabilities. But instead, you have started to say such things due to which all our hopes have been ground to dust. Just reflect for a moment on what you are saying to us." Then they said, "You are telling us that we should abandon obedience of those whom our forefathers have been worshipping. We have great suspicion about the truth of this matter to which you are inviting us, and as a result of this, tremendous anxiety arises in our hearts, because it is contrary to the maslak of our forefathers." Now over here, though the term yabudu has been translated as worshipping, but worshipping even has tremendous effect on human psyche. Because of this worshipping and these religious concepts and the wrong belief systems, people do not feel a need to change the system. So they are very much engrossed into it because these benefit those who are at the higher position within the society. And they get all the support for the man-made system, like the capitalist system. So this is why Yabudu over here has been translated as worshipping. Few people at the top influence human affairs. The people of the messenger Saleh appear to be surprised about being told to give up the path of their forefathers and to come to the path of Allah. This is part of the human psyche, that when we are not looking for something in our life and someone comes and tells us about a better way of doing things, many people resist this, as they do not feel any need or desire for this. And if one does not feel need and desire because one is a beneficiary of the existing man-made system, then they say, why should we change our course of life when I'm getting all the benefits? And secondly, I'm with the majority and I'm conforming with them. So they do argue within themselves. They do look at it rationally from their own perspective, from their own point of view. Some do listen, and a few of them do wish to adopt it after giving it rational consideration. And they are always in minority. And this is a fact of life which we observe, and it is based on evidence through our own experience as well. On the same pattern, these people had established a society which benefited a few at the top while the others were subjected to gross injustice. The messenger Saleh pointed towards this aspect and asked them to change their practices. In another verse, the Quran has pointed to something very important as evidence for our guidance. وَقَانَ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ تِسْعَةُ رَهْطٍ يُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا يُصْلِحُونَ. There were in the city 9 men who made mischief. That is, they were the ones who were causing fasad in the land and would not allow reformation. So it is always a small minority at the top, but they do get strength from the majority who willingly follow them. And many do follow them by saying that nothing can be changed. The day a human being says nothing can be changed, then nothing will be changed. Because this is our world and human beings have to act and change things. So that is why it is important for those who have come to the Quran and have decided to become Momin, that they should have a firm belief that things can be changed with Allah's help. And that is why Quran is here. And the whole of this account, we should keep it in mind how the things are developing in favor of Momineen. We see this today as well, where the few at the helm of affairs in each country abuse their power and commit injustices. The same applies to the most powerful nations. A few only of these control the whole world. 1163, Wahi of Allah should be taken seriously. Qala ya qawmi araytum in kuntu ala bayyinatin min rabbi wa atani minhu rahmatan faman yansuruni min Allahi in asaituhu fama tazidunani ghaira taksirin. At this, the messenger Saleh stated, "O my people, have you ever even pondered on this, that Allah has bestowed on me a supreme bounty like this Wahi, on the basis of which I am standing with a bright beacon which provides guidance towards the correct path." So messengers of Allah and Momineen with him were fully convinced of that. And that conviction they had created themselves. It was not induced in them or somebody forced them to have it. And that is important because the Quran has said, La ikraha fi Deen. If we want to come to the system of Deen, we should be willing to come to the Deen by using our own rational side and our own reasoning based on evidence. If despite this I adopt transgression to his commands, then who will save me from the grip of the law of requital? Whatever it is that you desire from me, it is not something in which you are talking of any benefit for me. Rather, you are taking me towards total destruction. Obviously, those people were resisting and they wanted him to go away or stop preaching, stop telling them, stop warning them. Because with his warning, obviously they were feeling uncomfortable. And what they should have done was that instead of feeling uncomfortable, they should have paid attention to it and what system he was presenting in the guidance of Wahi, they should have paid attention to it and said that we don't want inequality in our society. Everyone is an equal human being. Let us look at what he is trying to say. Further elaboration, the messenger of Allah were human beings with a highly developed self which they acquired in the light of the Wahi of Allah. Here the messenger Saleh has expressed a few important features of his own psyche. And it is important for us as students of the Quran that we relate to it, because these verses are also addressing us. So we should try to look into it and look into the finer aspects of it and try to bring in line our thought process, bring it in line with what is being said over here by the Quran. Firstly, he responds to his people by stating that I have clear evidence-based guidance from my Rabb, i.e. pointing to the system of Rububiyyat, which is going to replace the man-devised system of the society. So he firmly had conviction that this system will come because he is on the side of Haqq, and Haqq has to prevail. Secondly, he tells them that in this message of Allah resides the means for nourishment and development. That is Rahmat. And since I have a developed self, hence I see it clearly. That is another very important point, which he is stating that I know what I'm saying because I see it based on evidence. And that should be our position as well. Because with a developed self, which is working for the system of Deen and which has come to grips with the system of Deen, will see those things in the Quran which others cannot. You all can also benefit from this aspect, as I am here to share this with all of you. I.e., implicit here is the message that we can live a far better life than the one in which we are passing our days. Thirdly, I simply cannot go against this guidance as I have benefited from it, and I wish to extend it as an invitation to all of you as a community. Fourthly, if I decide to go against the law of Allah, then I will suffer the consequences just as all of you will if you do not come to this guidance of Allah. And that is a very powerful statement by him, that I know what will happen in case we go against the law of Allah. And all these balances which you see in your society, and I see them very clearly, are because you are going against the law of Allah. And all I'm trying to say is that the law of requital is going to catch up with you through your own deeds. Next verse 1164, the planet Earth is for the use of whole of mankind. وَيَا قَوْمِ هَذِهِ نَاقَةُ اللَّهِ لَكُمْ آيَاتًا فَذَرُوا تَأْكُلُوا فِي أَرْضِ اللَّهِ وَلَا تَمُسُّهَا بِسُوءٍ فَيَأْخُذَكُمْ عَذَابٌ قَرِيبٌ. You have imposed restrictions on this means of rizq which is obtained without any remuneration from Allah and which should be kept freely available for the whole of mankind. A very powerful statement over here, that the rizq, all the means of sustenance which are given to you, are placed at your disposal free from Allah. For example, sunshine, water, air, land. The first human beings who emerged on this earth, they all got this land free, because land belongs to Allah. It is subsequently that we started buying and selling this land and started to justify our right on it. You do not even allow the flocks of the poor and weak to graze freely in the open pastures, nor do you allow them to drink water from the springs. You have reserved it all exclusively for your own animal stock. See, this is a she-camel which is not in the ownership of anyone. I'm going to leave this she-camel of Allah free in the land of Allah so that it can roam around grazing and drink water in her turn. And this is another very important aspect, that she-camel became the sign of Allah, and he came to some kind of an agreement with those people. If you allow it to graze in this way, then it will be a sign for this fact that you intend to change your existing way. However, if you cause any harm to it, then it will become evident from this that you are not going to abandon your wrong path. After this, that punishment of destruction will descend upon you, whose time of arrival is not that far. My eyes see it very nearby. And with a developed self, one can see that, one can fairly come to some conclusion that outcome and the consequences of the deeds of these people are not very far off from them. Further reflections. After years of arguing with his people, the messenger Saleh reached some kind of understanding where a she-camel was selected as a sign from Allah, and everyone in the land was informed about this agreement. It appears that he had some influence among his people, especially those who held power at the top. We have seen on all the examples of the messengers of Allah, they belong to a fairly high part of the society, and they had decided to come to this path, and then they got Wahi from Allah. And because poor people who are struggling for making ends meet, they don't have power. And people who are in a position of power, who are educated, they are better placed to tell others because they can explain to others. So it puts a higher premium, higher responsibility on those people who have some kind of a power in a society. The Quran has left it to us to figure out these details by relating to the way human society functions socially. So these aspects we have to derive our own selves, because Quran leaves these gaps for us to figure out so that our intellect develops. And that is how intellect develops when it analytically looks at it, relates it to the time in which we live, and then looks at the Deen, and then see how permanent values are being applied over here by the Quran. The issue was very simple. All human beings are equal, and the means of sustenance need to be shared on an equitable basis among them. This includes sharing of the land and its produce. For example, pastures were grazing by all animals, whether owned by rich or poor. This was not an easy agreement to accept by those in power, but it appears that Saleh had managed to come to an understanding, superficially, with those who had control over the affairs of society. And this is within the realm of possibility that people do agree at times if one has influence in a society that what this messenger is saying does appeal to our mind. And let us look at it. And some of the reasonable people may come to this agreement and they put pressure on those who are powerful. But deep down, some of them do not accept these agreements. However, while these people were agreeing to this, their hearts were not in it, and they did not wish to keep to their side of the agreement. We witness this kind of conduct in world affairs where rich and powerful nations go against those very same agreements which they themselves make with the poor nations. For example, the recent history of the UN contains many examples where powerful nations have gone against its agreed charter. This creates conflicts in the world, as a consequence of which innocent people are exploited and lose their lives. Few more points of interest. Since all human actions have consequences as per the law of requital, the Quran has directed our attention to this aspect. Never think that anything can get through the net of human accountability. So this is the bottom line. We need to understand that everything is very precise and accurate in Allah's word. If we see a randomness in human affairs, then we need to make more efforts to find out the finer details and look at the psychological side of decision making, because that is where we will find the answer. We need to constantly bear this aspect in mind in whatever we do individually as well as collectively. Another aspect which we need to note is that while all this is taking place in that society, the poor and those who have accepted Iman are witnessing all this taking place before their eyes. They see the gross injustice due to which they are suffering, both physically in terms of economic deprivation and psychologically due to the uncertainty caused by this ongoing confrontation. So it must be a very stressful and worrying environment in which there must be a lot of fear. But obviously, Messenger Saleh and Momineen with him were not going to be affected by that because they could recognize the cause for that. And then they also had the assurance from Allah that ultimately things will go in their favor. Allah has provided assurance to the Messenger Saleh and the Momineen that the punishment for the criminality of these people in power is very near, and that they need to continue to persevere on this path of theirs. They also need to start planning ahead about the new era of Deen after the elimination of these evil people from the land. And that is part of the responsibility of those who have become Momineen and are keen students of the system of Deen and the Quran, that they should start looking ahead, that as and when things go in their favor, then they should be ready to take on the responsibility. 1165 agreements need to be honored. فَأَقَرُوهَا فَقَالَ تَمَتَّعُوا فِي دَارِكُمْ ثَلَاثَةَ أَيَّامٍ ذَلِكَ وَعْدٌ غَيْرُ مَكْذُوبٍ. They killed this she-camel. At this, Saleh told them that you can live in these homes for a further 3 days. After that, a destruction will descend upon you. This is such a promise which will never be proved false. Since they never accepted any of the warnings of Saleh to be true, hence they treated this too as a mere threat. Momineen need to plan ahead. Now, as I said earlier in the previous under the previous verses, that these people, the hearts of some of these people was not into this agreement. So the moment they found some opportunity, they went and killed that she-camel. In any case, that she-camel was grazing around freely as it was agreed, because the whole point was to make them understand that this land belongs to Allah. And if land belongs to Allah, then it belongs to every human being and every animal on the face of this earth. This unjust group conspired and killed the she-camel, thinking that what can the messenger Saleh possibly do, as he is weak and has no power to punish them for this heinous crime of breaking the covenant with Allah. And that is where the fall comes, when people start thinking and demeaning other human beings and think that they can get away with their deeds. That is where the fall comes of any nation. Every agreement which the messengers and Momineen make with others have a higher value in the scales of deeds. And this is an instruction for all of us that who are on this path must realize that whatever agreement and contracts and covenants which we make, they are in the presence of Allah. and we must fulfill them. When this agreement was made, the period of respite was reaching its end for these people, and Saleh had warned them not to take it lightly. However, they did not take it seriously, and after considering all the options of breaking the agreement, they thought to kill the she-camel and end this confrontation with Saleh and the Momineen as if they did not matter as human beings. Because the agreement they were making, they forgot that they are also equal human beings like them. And when they break up this agreement, they are actually demeaning other human beings. They are causing disrespect and insulting them. And that is not acceptable in the book of Allah. A very serious mistake indeed which they committed. With this killing, the time of respite ended, and they only had a few days, that is 3 days noted here. Just see how important it is to think about it, that they had time of respite, and that time of respite would have continued until the time they had kept obeying that agreement. They did not, if they had not broken that agreement, then their time of respite would not have ended. Left before they were to face the consequences of their evil conduct. These days were required because Saleh and his companions needed time to leave that place in order to protect themselves. The verse concludes with a very powerful decree, ذَلِكَ وَعْدٌ غَيْرُ مَكْذُوبٍ. This promise cannot be falsified. It is an immutable law of Allah. Further elaboration. The Quran has not gone into any detail about the time period between the forming of this agreement, about the she-camel, and the evil act of breaking the agreement and killing this animal. There may even be further arguing with these people by the Messenger of Allah as we see this happening in today's world. So we can relate to these things because these things do arise in our mind that how long this agreement lasted. So the issue over here is not that how long it lasted. The issue is that they broke the agreement because they were rebellious people. They enjoyed transgressing Allah's laws. People without Iman do not possess that kind of psyche which can give them inner peace and certainty. So their own inner dissonance, their own inner deviance, that was the cause of the problem. Because they felt very unhappy, and they might have thought that why should we obey, why should we agree with the Saleh and these Momineen? And as a result, out of arrogance, some of them decided to kill the animal. Even when this final warning is delivered to them after this killing, these people do not take it seriously. They take it lightly as they know Saleh and the Momineen do not possess any physical power with which they can punish them for this heinous crime against humanity. They know from previous experience that the natural events do not cause any destruction, the kind with which the Messenger had warned them. This is where Allah enjoins the Momineen that what is noted in the Quran needs to be made an intrinsic part of our psyche so that we can relate it to the world events around us. Now over here, there is a point of instruction for us that the world in which we are living, there is a plenty evil going on. And if we are not moved by it and we do not come to the Quran, or even if we have come to the Quran, but we are not willing to delve deeply into it, to look at the system of Deen and then join together with those who are making efforts in this direction, then essentially they are outside the remit of the Quranic protection, which the Quran promises to Momineen. So this is the point which we should keep it in mind, that we have to create a desire and a need in order to counter this evil what is going on, and in order to get the help of Allah, I mean the laws of Allah. Next verse 1166, the Quran is focused on Momineen. فَلَمَّا جَاءَ أَمْرُنَا نَجَّيْنَا صَالِحًا وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ بِرَحْمَةٍ مِنَّا وَمِنْ خِزْيِ يَوْمَئِذٍ إِنَّ رَبَّكَ هُوَ الْقَوِيُّ الْعَزِيزُ. Consequently, when the time for the manifestation of the outcomes of deeds arrived, we saved Saleh and those companions of his who were Momineen from this agonizing destruction through our rahmah. Because the whole process, the whole procedure which is noted over here by Allah is directed and focused towards Momineen, because they are on haqq, and the whole universe has been created as haqq and to promote haqq. So that is the point we should keep in mind, that if we have come to this path, then we have acquired a very high value according to the value system of the Quran. Of a surety, the law of your Rabb is very powerful and has the ability to prevail. Two words used over here, Kaviyul Aziz, that it is not only that Allah possesses the power or His laws possess the power, but that power can also be used for the support of Haqq. So both things should be very reassuring, and same goes for Momineen as well, that they should acquire the power and then should not be afraid of using that power. There's no point in acquiring power and then using it. And power means every latent potential which we possess, we should try to manifest it in the outer world so that we keep striving and keep progressing towards the system of Deen. The Quran is about Momineen and their success. In this verse, the Quran has summed up the purpose of its guidance, which is to guide the Jamaat-e-Momineen in the functioning of the laws of Allah in the human world. Everything and all events follow His laws, and there is no randomness in these occurrences. The whole point of the Quran is take out that factor in our minds which says that this world is meaningless, it is aimless, and everything happens at random. And Quran wants us to start looking at things the way these are precise and accurate, the way the scales work in our human world. What happened in the past will be repeated in the future, i.e. the law of respite and the law of requital will not leave any people alone. When the time of respite ended, these people were destroyed while the Jamaat-e-Momineen, headed by the messenger Saleh, were saved as they were to go elsewhere or return to the same land and establish the system of Deen. The attributes of Rahmat and Rabb point in this direction. Allah did not do injustice to anyone, as we had covered previously as well in the Surah Yunus. These people did injustice to themselves, the consequence of which was that their physical life was cut short. So the point over here is that the law of requital is very firm and it does not spare anyone. If people die early, it makes no difference to the law of requital. People must face the consequences of their deeds. If they want to cut down their stay in this world, then they should keep doing evil and they will ultimately be eliminated much earlier than what the physical laws of Allah permit us to live. To establish the Rububiyyat of Allah as a system that is Deen, His laws possess enough power to do this. However, it is conditional on a Jamaat-e-Momineen rising up to implement this. So another point which we should keep in mind is that all of these accounts which we have covered so far, they are all focused on Jamaat-e-Momineen. If we want all this to happen, then we have to become that Jamaat to which Allah's promise is fulfilled. Further elaboration, 1166. There are a few noteworthy aspects of the human psyche illustrated in this verse and similar verses for those who become part of this Jamaat of Momineen. Firstly, this Jamaat emerges in very challenging circumstances and has to evolve over a period of many years before it gains in strength. The Quran has used the metaphor of a seed. It is a Jamaat of individuals who accept Iman and have acquired developed self through Saleh deeds. There is no shortcut in this recipe, as without this self and this lofty aim, they simply cannot use the Quran for their education, training, and self-development. Secondly, those in the vanguard of the Jamaat have to take a lead and help it to grow in strength. In the initial stages, they need to acquire this conviction that once on this path called Sirat al-Mustaqim, they are bound to get the help of Allah. Thirdly, tangible results manifest after a short period of time when others join in and signs of the development of the self become visible within each member. Those who become bored or suffer from uncertainty gradually move away, and that is important. This path is not for someone who temporarily comes on it and says that this is not possible or has doubts and has suspicions and is not firmly committed to it. Then this path is not for them. This adds strength to this Jamaat as such people try to create distractions and weaknesses among them. And actually people who are not fully committed to this Sirat al-Mustaqim, if they leave, they add strength to Jamaat-e-Momineen. And that is the point one should keep in mind, that the question over here or the issue over here is not of numbers. The issue over here is that how many of them have become that movement that Muslim which the Quran has defined very clearly. Verses like these add inner strength to this Jamaat, and of course, these members take adequate precautions for their own protection and keep a close watch on events in the world. The law of requital helps to maintain a focus in this respect. Next verse 1167, destruction through the law of requital has different forms. وَأَخَذَ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا السِّيَّةُ فَأَصْبَحُوا فِي دِيَارِهِمْ جَاثِمِينَ. And a forceful shrieking thunder, an earthquake, overwhelmed these rebellious people, and they were rendered petrified and lifeless in their homes. Now, sometimes people get distracted that what was the punishment and how did it happen? Where was this town or city? That is not an issue. Those are distractions from which we should avoid ourselves, because we have a very short time in this life. And what we need to do is to become that moment, to become that Muslim, and then come together so that the evil which is widely spread in the world, one can be a force against it, and we can get Allah's help to create that system for which Allah is all the time prepared to provide us help, provide us aid. And this is something which is coming out of all these accounts. Momineen need to keep close watch on the state of affairs in the world. The destruction arrived in the form of an earthquake. The Quran has referred to a shrieking thunder, and this annihilated these unjust people. Their physical sojourn in the world ended as they had crossed the threshold of the law of respite, and the law of requital ended their lives. We have discussed some details about the massive flood faced by the people of the messenger Nuh, the stormy winds faced by the people of the messenger Hud, the volcanic eruption faced by the people of Lut, and now in this case, an earthquake. We have also gone through other accounts as well, like of Pharaoh and also of the messenger Yunus. All these natural events are linked to the evil conduct of these people, and here there is an instruction for us as students of the Quran. All these people were warned in advance of the outcomes of their evil deeds, but they ignored these warnings. The messengers of Allah were informed about the impending arrival of these natural events, and as a consequence, they managed to make their escape from the harmful effects by taking advanced precautions. Because the whole point was for the Momineen to come out successful, because they had to now establish the system. Verse 1168, Kufr has an expiry date. Kanlam yagnaw fiha ala inna samuda kafaru rabbahum ala bodan le samud. And those houses became desolate and destroyed in such a way as if these people had never ever lived in them. Remember, the Thamud nation had adopted the path of rejection and transgression against the laws of Allah. The consequence of this was that they became deprived of the bounties of life. Further reflections on this verse. The Quran has drawn a very vivid picture of the destroyed city and invited us to visualize it clearly using the historical evidences in our world. How many past empires have disappeared forever, and a new set of people have taken their places. Some of these nations never thought of their destruction. And even at an individual level, we need to go to a cemetery and imagine that all these graves belong to people who once roamed around on the face of the planet. None of them will ever come back to this world. And that will be our fate as well. And that is something which we should keep in mind, that here the Quran is inviting us to become Momineen, to become Muslim, come together and then work as a Jamaat towards the system of Deen, and then seek Allah's help. And we will never ever get this chance again. And while we are making this effort, we are benefiting from our self-development. What happened to other nations? The same fate visited the Muslims after the initial era of the establishment of Deen in the 7th century AD. I thought just to remind ourselves that what happened in the recent history and when the Quran was revealed. The important issue to which Allah has drawn our attention is that what is given in the Quran is to help any set of human beings who are willing to become dissatisfied with man-devised systems and then decide to follow an alternative path in the light of the guidance of Wahi of Allah. All the accounts of the messengers point to one simple fact, that these people did not wish to consider any alternative to the unjust system under which they lived. and under which they wish to continue living. But this is not how the system of Allah operates in the world. People die despite being unwilling to die. Few more reflections on this verse. The life of kufr cannot continue unhindered, and its decline is inbuilt within such systems. And it's very reassuring for those who become Momineen. And for us in Tolu Islam, this is very reassuring, and we should keep that in mind that things do change. If we make an effort on Allah's path, then things do change. The system of Rububiyyat can only emerge in a land when the system of kufr disappears. Here the Quran has drawn our attention in very succinct style by stating, Allah inna samuda kafaru rabbuhum. The people of Thamud did kufr to the invitation of Rububiyyat and hence signed their own death warrants and committed suicide as per the law of requital. Then the Quran concludes by stating for us, Allah bodan le samud. And see how much firmness in this part of the verse that they were eliminated. They did not deserve to be on this planet. And what they were doing deserved the punishment which they got. Just listen carefully that the Thamud were removed from planet Earth. Why did this happen? Because when people stand up for haqq, then Batil has to be eliminated. And who stood up for haqq? Momineen. Batil exists so long as haqq does not emerge in the world. This is that fact to which the Quran has drawn our attention repeatedly. For example, in Surah Bani Israel, وَقُلْ جَاءَ الْحَقُّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلُ إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. And announce it. Haqq has arrived and Batil perish, for Batil is bound to perish. Verses like this are meaningless if they cannot be applied in the real world. The issue before us is to ponder over the Quran and gradually acquire a high level of conviction on this path. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen. Thank you very much.